Um, so the first step's wet and wet. And we're going to wet the entire face up into the hair and so forth in order to get it prepared for the pigment. That's not it. I don't know if you can see the drawing. Can you see the drawing there?
Yes.
And I pre-mix a lot of the paint because it takes a while to put together, you know, the right mixture. And I know it would be sort of a waste of time here. Not waste, but take up the time that would ordinarily be spent doing other things. And so I try to mix everything in advance. That might be a little bit too dark, so I might have to add some water. Now these mixtures of skin tone are basically yellow ochre, cerulean blue, and a little rose madder genuine. And the shadow color is the same pigment, except that it has alizarin in it instead of the rose madder, so we can get a little darker. And the key is to keep the paper wet, but when you place the brush onto the paper, you don't want to have a lot of water on your brush. Otherwise, because there's water on the paper already, so there's no point in adding more water to it before you put your pigment down. So, we'll start with a little wet, cover everything, the face all the way down. Then we're going to go around the highlights. Here's a nose, highlight on the nose and on the bridge of the nose. We'll go around the lips and the eyes. And the reason is I don't want the skin tones, etc., to get in the way of, or changing the pigment, or changing the color of what's underneath the, the skin tone. So, I go right up into the hair because it's going to be darker anyway, around the eyes. You can ask questions if you want at any time. I don't know if I have the answer. I'll check my Funk and Wagnall for questions I don't have the answer for.
Do you do your drawings in real life, always?
These are from photographs. I don't have really, except for a workshop, I don't have really access to from life long enough to do it from life unless have a model that's interested in sitting for hours and hours and hours. And as I say, I don't draw that fast, so I'm kind of slow. And it really is impractical for me to try to do a lot of stuff from life, which I do. That one there where I spent so much time on, I think that's from life, but I can't be certain because that was some time ago, and I don't quite remember. For all I know, that painting was started at a workshop, and when I was finished with the workshop for the day and go back to the motel, I couldn't see a reason why I would want to bother what do you call it, watching just television. So I always bring an easel for this little contraption. You can thank Marilyn Rose for that idea. It's just PVC pipe that you put together. It doesn't weigh it, barely weighs 3 ounces. And you can use it for an incline wherever you go. Anyway, I'll spend the time in the motel messing around with a painting. And that's another one there was one of those that I did. Turned out it's an award winner, so I don't know what they were thinking. But I don't know who else. Now I'm pretty familiar with other people's work here. Is there anyone here who's doing portraits aside Lynn Palmer? I know is doing them, and is anyone in the audience doing them or wants to try to do them? I suggest people that you should try to get to people who can help you with that. My first teacher in watercolor was Elizabeth Horowitz, and some of you are probably familiar with her because no doubt she's taught a lot of people. And I really got started with her over there. I think it was the Summit. I guess they changed the name of it. I don't know what it is anymore. Summit Visual Arts or something. And she, she always had a topic every day or every week to do, and one of them was a portrait. You had to draw the portrait, right there in class, and that was pretty mean. So I was so disappointed with it that I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do another one, but I'm going to do it on my speed, and finally got it done, and turned out pretty good. Actually, it got me into the New Jersey Watercolor Society show for the first time. But okay, let's get this thing going here. So if you've had experience with portraits, or you want to do portraits, I would go on the line and take a quick look at the portraits by Charles Reed, or what's his name, Michael Holter, I think. There are really many, and I notice I take the brush and get rid of some of the excess water before I start applying any kind of paint. But there are good studies as well. Janet Rogers, just mentioned Janet Rogers recently, took a workshop up, and I think it was in that, what do you call it, Hudson River Place. She's a good one. She's a really excellent portrait artist too, so that's someone you would want to show up with. A lot of DVDs out there. It's a little too dark, but maybe it won't be so bad once it dries. A little more water, go around the highlight.
What colors are those?
Yellow ochre, a little rose madder, and cerulean blue, which is my absolute go-to favorite color. I don't know why. It's just a fantastic blue and mixes other colors beautifully. The only drawback is that it's very sedimentary. So if you use it, you mix it somewhere, you have to make sure you mix it back in there really well. Otherwise, it'll separate out quickly, and it's not something that you really want to. Unless that's happens to be your objective,
John, do you use a transfer paper?
Okay, I have used it, but I find that it's a little messy. Now, I have a lot of lines here on this lady here, and they're just pencil. I think it's HB or something like that. And the problem with pencil is sometimes it leaves a mark and you can't get it up. But in my case, I didn't do it this time because I wanted you to see the marks, but after I get the drawing transferred, I'll go ahead and erase a lot of the lines. Oh, well, what am I doing this from my brain? I guess I'll have to try. I can't remember what I did with the photograph. Okay, so this is the shadow color, and you keep it nice and wet. It doesn't bleed too much as long as you get the paper wet and take the excess stuff out of the brush, excess water out of the brush, and gives you a little more control over your edges. Under the nose. And even before you start to model it, you'll notice that it's actually coming to life, and you haven't done anything yet. You're just putting in some shadow shapes, which again shows you how important shadow shapes are in defining what it is that you're trying to do. You can recognize someone from 100 yards down in the street, not even have a pair of sunglasses on. But see, I know that person. I can see them coming, but you can't really see the features. It's the entirety of the person and the shapes and the shadow shapes that you're looking at that give the person away. So if you get your shadow shapes right, the person will really come to life, and that should be your goal. In fact, you could almost do just a black and white painting of somebody. And just do the shadow shapes, and you say, oh, I know who that person is. Okay, now that's kind of messy, but we're going to let it dry. I won't use the hair dryer. And then the next step, you'll see how other things that we're going to do with this to make it more, not realistic, but make more sense than just simply this stuff here now. Okay, so what do I do next? That's all I'm going to do on that. I'm not going to use a hair dryer to kind of let it bleed and just let it have its way with it, and maybe clean up a few edges. I think I'll do the shirt now because I want that to dry, because when I do the hair, I'm not ready to have it bleed into the skin tones. I'm really disappointed with the you'll see when I do the shirt, and I'm disappointed with that, and that's my fault because I went too fast and didn't think about it enough. And the important thing is to pay attention sometimes to what you're doing. This is the source of the drawing. Well, can you see that? Okay. So you can see the shirt's quite dark, but I wonder what I should have done is after I made an application of some of the initial wash, we'll let it dry and maybe splatter some masking fluid on it. And then can go over it later on once it's dry, and then I can start getting some texture in it. But it's not exactly the way things turned out. So, but we're going to do the shirt quickly so we can get into the hair. The shirt really is, what is the shirt? What the heck is the shirt? That's the hair, that's the background, that's the shirt. Okay. The shirt is, there's no magic to this one. I simply mixed some ultramarine blue, burnt sienna maybe, and some ivory black. To be honest with you, I don't remember. But those of you who may have taken a class from Elizabeth Horowitz, she referred to her dynamic duo, which is sort of your go-to, and I'll use it later on, but it's a go-to combination of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. It gives you a fantastic range of grays, warm to cool grays. And we're going to use that in the background, because when in doubt, I can always go to that for a background. All right, so we'll just do this a little wet. It's dry enough there. It's probably going to bleed a little bit, but now I don't know. I know this lady's name. It's, to be honest with you, I think it's Sonia. And I did a charcoal drawing her many years ago. She's actually a photograph from a DVD workshop that I purchased from somebody called Michael Britton, who's a Canadian but it's fantastic shapes, shadows to work with. And just, you know, if you're going to do your own photography for portraits, just the most important thing is to make sure you don't take a flash. Don't use a flash, because that will wash out all of the shadows, and you need shadows to make the thing work. So if you can do it without a flash, or maybe in front of a window or something where you can get that Rembrandt look where this whole face is lit, but then there's a little triangle over here that helps to define the face. So we're just going to throw this on. I have no interest in really modeling it so much as to get the paper wet, get it down there. Because values are very difficult to judge. She may look awfully dark now, and it looks kind of dark to me, but don't forget, everything around it is so white. So, yeah, we'll just come down here and fiddle around with that a little bit. It's a little darker on this side. Come up. What did Ed Koch say do you remember what Ed Koch said when he visited the pyramids? Do you know who first start, do you know who Ed Koch is? Former mayor of New York, and really very interesting mayor. But he had a trip to Egypt as, I guess he was his mayor, and it got him sitting on a camel, and his caption was "How am I doing? Bring me your toughest camel." And only way Ed Koch could say it. Well, so say, how am I doing? So anyway, I love that guy. He said it the way it's supposed to say it. Okay, so now there's no texture there, but you know, when in doubt, you just sort of plop around in there, hit something somewhere. It may look awful now, but at some point, it may start to come together. That's a bad edge, maybe, so we get rid of that. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay. What time is it?
20 up.
20 up? Okay. All right, so we're going to try to do the hair. Now, the hair for me, as I think maybe some of you heard me say before, get a photograph of the person with a hat on and no teeth. Because hair is the most difficult thing for me, and if I'm going to mess something up, it's going to be the hair. It's going to take usually takes a lot of work to correct it. So I'm going to show you the best that I can do today, which is not necessarily the best that I can do overall. But it will be instructive in terms of how I approach it. And I have trouble with real estate. I call this real estate. And there's more of it than I like to use, because I'm better off fooling around in there and not in here. But you have to do it. So when you're doing hair, you try to break it up into sections and kind of work on the section by itself before trying to, in fact, do the whole thing. So I'm going to try to work just in this area. And it'll be wet and wet with two colors, kind of a cerulean and rose madder or something, maybe alizarin. It's a little bit of a purple shade to it, and then also the hair. But so we'll work this wet and wet, but in a specific way so that we get some kind of control over what we're doing. Now the highlight, as I said, is intended to be not white. I think if you look at most people's hair in the sun, it really isn't white. even the whites of the eyes aren't white. They appear that way, but in practice, it's not really the case. So we're gonna wet this whole area. I'm gonna put in our entire highlight light all the way around. We might stop over here, and then we'll come back in with the first, remember, this is the first wash. This is not a wash that would ever be considered done. And when we get to the final step, that's where you would start thinking about starting adding real refinements and darks to what you're doing, bringing the whole thing to life. Hmm?
You're going to start with the dark.
Huh?
You're going to start with the dark first. You're going to do the dark first and the yet?
No, I'm going to put this highlight color in first, wet into wet, and then I'm going to work the dark color into that,
Okay.
so that it hopefully doesn't look like straw. This is not the actual color, it's just a little left over on the brush from the highlight, which is not really quite correct. Anybody asleep yet?
John, why do you focus on portraits?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Like ladies or what's the
You know,
story?
somebody asked me that the other day, and I said, I don't know why, except to say that my mother was a classical pianist from, where is it, Juilliard. She went to the Juilliard school. She was an artist. She painted a lot of things, and so I never became a musician, and I can't really, up until now, I really can't say I really became an artist, but I was around it for so long, and I recall, for some reason, I had a book of, if anybody remembers Walter T. Foster, you could always get those books on how to do a tree, how to do a person, how to do whatever. And for some reason, I had a Walter T. Foster book on portraits. And this was in, I hate to say it, 1958. So my first portraits were pencil portrait copies from Walter T. Foster's book. And I don't know, houses and trees never really made a connection. And I think it's because I enjoy getting a likeness, and if the nostril's off or the eye is off, I notice it. But if a tree is off, I'm not so into fixing that. So it is a good question, but I don't know, why do you like to do landscapes? Maybe for the same reason I like to do portraits. It's hard to know. I have a few landscapes, if you will, in my repertoire. But I would be, well, there's only one that I think I've ever shown. It's a window with blue shutters with some pewter things in it. I called it Sentinels, but it's from an old schoolhouse up in northern New Jersey, where I took photographs of it on a motorcycle ride once. I said, wow, that might make a nice paint. I made it, but it's been hanging around in my whole closet for a long time. So anyway, that's gotta get it wet enough. Nobody answered that question. Why do you do landscapes or still lifes or anybody?
I do
Marion?
houses.
Marion does a lot of different things, so she doesn't really get herself tied into one specific genre. Mel Vigman seems to like architecture and mountains and stuff like that. So why is that important to you? Can you tell me?
Well, I
It's not-
think
it's not a-
watercolor portraiture
it's not a
is the
test.
Oh, he doesn't hear me.
Who is it?
It's Susie. I think the watercolor portraiture is the hardest, genre in the watercolor world. I really do. I mean, did you see the Obama portraits being unveiled recently?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they were oil or acrylic, but I mean, they kind of went off of the general portrait
Yes.
tour that they usually
Yeah.
put in the National Gallery or the White House.
Yeah, I was kind of a traditional, I was kind of disappointed. I didn't feel, someone asked me about this earlier, I didn't feel it was presidential.
I agree, but I think the Kennedys started that. You know, the Kennedys sort of went off script too.
Well, now,
There's-
Susanna does portraits too. You do people and landscapes.
If I have to. If
Well-
I have to. Well, not landscapes, but the peoples. Do you do,
do the thing like
commissions, John?
that, and you're
Yes.
so good at portraits. And that's probably why you selected to what you love. I think we all do that, right? We like to get success, and that's why we work on what we do. Not that it's always successful, but you are a success. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes.
The check is in the mail.
Well, for me, it's always the challenge, whether I can accomplish it or not.
Well, Jill's another story where she has a wide range of subject matter. And not just houses that she does landscapes. I've seen her do pet portraits and so forth. So I'm kind of boring in the sense that this is all I do, but others have a better, a wider range of subject matter. Now we pull this up into the wet area. So it doesn't look so straw. Now I think this is all I'm going to do because that's going to dry and it allows me to get the background in quickly and at the same time get to the next step, which I think you'll like that a lot better. I like it too because this is can I just get through this and get to the good stuff is what I say to myself. So.
Looks good.
Now this of course is not done. At some point I would start adding darker versions of it. I'd pick out some dark strands that give it more texture and so forth. But that's kind of the idea of how I do it. It's wet and wet, highlight, and then I don't go over the completely black. I take the dark area, take it up to a certain point, and then start working it into the highlight area. Okay. So well, let's move on. What time there? I want to make sure we stay on that focus here.
What time do you want your break, John?
I'm going to stop at after about 15, 20 minutes on this next step.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to kind of keep the clock available on that. Like I say, I'm not finishing the portrait. I'm just showing you what the steps that I go through to get it done. Background. Okay, now background is wet and wet, of course, but it's also the most important part initially, as I said, is to get rid of the white of the paper. You can't judge value unless all of the values are in there working, so you know whether, well, that should be that lighter or darker, but you can't tell till you get something down on paper. And I've been doing these silly little they're actually in the sketchbooks there. I didn't open up that page. Sometimes you get a little tight, like, I don't want to work on that thing anymore. I've been 40 hours in, I don't want to bother with it anymore. So what can I do that's fun? Well, open up my sketchbook and I find a goofy expression. Well, my daughter has one, my son is in there, I'm in there as Dr. Irwin Corey, and having fun with a painting that it's not meant for exhibits, it's just meant for my sketchbook, so I don't have to, I try hard, but I don't go out of my way to make it make it decent, so. But it turns out they're pretty decent. So, all right, so we get a little, put the background in a little bit here. It might bleed into the hair a little, so be it. That's not bad. You get a nice soft edge there. Backgrounds for me are generally, aside from hair, are the most difficult because I tend to jump before thinking. And that means I say, well, that would make a great portrait. And then when I get into it, what am I going to do with the background? I get stuck with the background. You should be thinking the background, I guess, while you're also thinking of the portrait. Working on a painting now, I don't know how long it'll take to get it done. So I think I'm getting typecast as someone who paints women with parasols. Like my mother-in-law, painting I did my mother-in-law when she's about 21 or 2 years old. She's sitting under her parasol. I can't tell you how long it took me to paint that. And here I am painting another one of a young girl I saw at an air show. Dressed in World War II period clothing, sitting under a pink parasol, all of the reflected light onto the blue blanket that she's on and onto her face and the whole thing. But then after I get the drawing done, drawing the parasol, I said, what the hell? I can't paint the background. I don't have enough of it. Well, what I got to do? So you get into these little tight spots where, now what am I going to do? I got this thing on, about hours on the drawing. What do I do? You're stuck with weeks of thinking about a stupid background. So if you take my word for it, think about it first, not last. Now this is what Elizabeth would call your dynamic duo version. It's burnt sienna and burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and you can mix this in any, concentration. If you want a cool or warm gray, you just add less blue or more blue, and you get a nice background. Now this, as I say later on, will probably further along in the steps if I were to ever finish this portrait. I would have, more washes on the background, darken it, maybe try to find a way to add some more texture and some interest to it. But you can see right away, if her face looked awful, wow, that's awfully dark. But when you start putting in this other stuff, maybe not so bad. Well, that's what I figured, right? I go over the hair right there because it's going to be very dark anyway. I hope you're taking good notes. There's a written test at the end of this. When I stamp my feet, you'll know it's a question on the test. that's a clue that there's a question. Okay, so now it's still wet, but it's kind of flat, but, there's just kind of do that to add some interest to it. A little directional work, and of course, it's not going to show up that great at this point, but enough to show that there's some interest in there. And when you come back to do the background later in more detail, you just repeat the steps, that's all. Okay, Sonia, let's go on. Why don't we you want to take a break now? I can get the other next step prepared. Let me show you what that next step looks like. This is what the next step, it assumes that I finish the step I'm currently on, and then I'm going to work with the eyes, nose, and mouth. Okay, let's take the break now, and I can get set up probably.
Probably start around February 2nd, so get painting and get ready for another great show.
Everyone, thank June for putting on, stepping up and filling in. She's doing a great job. Thank you. And again, volunteer, we can always help, even if it's just a little bit. It always helps. Even if you can spend, like, if you drop off your painting, you can hang out for a half an hour and just kind of help out. It's always helpful. Or even when we're, receiving, people bring stuff in, it always helps if you can hang out for a little bit and just help check stuff in. Every little bit can help. Remember, we're all volunteers here, and like I said, we're a great group to work with. Everyone kind of gets along and kind of enjoys it. All right, we're back to John again. You're up again, John. Let me go get the lights.
But before you get here,
Oh, wait a minute.
I mentioned the fact that I break the monotony of doing something like that. It's something that nobody, well, it's not that you don't see it, because I never put it in the show, because I'm on a just put photos of myself. So I have a lot of fun with it. So I thought I'd show you a couple of them. That's a self-portrait. If you know who Professor Irwin Corey is, some of this, and this one is from a model. Her name is Caitlin St. Angelo. Some of you may be familiar with. She had that screwy little thing with her lips, and that's nothing much there. Now this is a friend of mine that lives in Phoenix, David Buckhinder. But I printed the photograph out because when I first saw it, I said, wow, I think I would hate that, but I didn't want to make a big show of it, so I did that one. And then that's my son. And let's see what else. That's my daughter. She was in the hospital. I forget for what, but and then this is some guy smoking a cigarette somewhere in Italy somewhere. So anyway, so I do those things to kind of. That's my next one for my son. I haven't finished that one yet. So anyway.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah, hit the lights, pal.
John,
Somebody has a question, John.
Yes.
I have a question about your sketchbook.
Yes.
It seemed even from this distance that you had a lot of writing next to those paintings. Are they notes about pigments, etc., or what are they about?
Notes about things like the paper itself, how awful it is, what I was thinking about that time, what am I going to do next, what I was captured by. It's sort of a personal diary, if you will, for that particular painting. And I encourage people to do that when you do a painting, and maybe you're not going to put it in the show, but put some notes on it. So when you go back to it and look at it, wow, I remember that. Okay, so we're going to move along. I'm going to paint one eye. We're a little short of time, so I'm going to paint one eye, and it's essentially both wet and wet and wet on dry, but more wet on wet than wet on dry. And get the right brush here. And it's going to be like 3 or 4 colors. First, we need something for the white of the eye, so we're going to use a little cerulean blue to gray it down with a little, what do you call that? Rose madder, and just a tad. I mean, you can't even see the palette, I suppose. Maybe you can see the palette. Anyway, a little bit of yellow ochre to gray it down, and it kind of looks like it's almost purple. Can you see that?
Yes.
That might be a little dark, but because it's wet on wet, it won't be so bad. And then the iris will be burnt sienna. Initially, just straight burnt sienna, and then we're going to darken it with a little ivory black in it. I really have two.
John, do you wet all your sheets and then stretch them?
No, I don't stretch at all.
You don't, you just staple them?
Yeah, because I use a light box. When I finish my drawing and I decide how big or small I want the painting to be, then when I finish the drawing, get staples to do it, bring it back, trace the drawing, stick it on the light box, and then transfer it. But you can't do that with a piece of stretched paper because it's already on the board. So I just stapled it down, and if it wrinkles, it wrinkles. I don't, you know, I try. I first finished the painting using 300-pound, 300-pound, whatever that is, arches, and I probably never use it again. But the problem is that it has a very tough texture. It's so very hard to get the edges that you want. Okay, and the last thing is a straight ivory black. Okay, so now the thing that I do, one thing I haven't shown you really is, you ever seen these little things?
Yeah.
You go to the photograph, and this is if you want to spend the time duplicating what you see on this photograph. You know, if you look at that, see it's kind of purple. When you go to your painting, hey, not even close. So you know you're kind of working back and forth. So this is your target. Get rid of all of the tones around it so you can actually see what you're trying to do. But only on rare occasions do I pay any attention to trying to match. I did it on one painting. I didn't bring it in for you to see, where I tried to match it. Wow. You know, I probably had 100 hours in that painting before I finally finished it. But. Okay, so we're going to just do her right eye. And I did a little bit of a dot there for the highlight. Well, first we wet the whole thing. We go around into everything except the highlight. We go around the highlight. We don't do it. I do it. You can do it if you want. Not me. Okay. Now we come back in with our gray color, but we don't go into the iris with the gray color, so you kind of test it to see if it bleeds out. Put in a little bit more. always either start farthest away from the line you want to protect, or always start in the middle of a shape so you can control how much, or determine if it's going to bleed in an area that shouldn't be, into which it would be bleed. Thank you, Winston Churchill. Okay, so that's the gray part. Then we go to straight burnt sienna. Then we again test in the center. That's bleeding a little bit too much, but we just keep adding it. Eventually we work our way around the highlight. And still maybe a little too much more on here. It's just an eye that hasn't even been really constructed. But even at this moment, she's coming to life. And you look at, wow, it's working, it's working, you know. But if you go too fast, it kind of doesn't work so good. All right, so now we're trying a little of the darkest part. And there, you know, as you go around the eye, there's always a little shadow from the lid. It's a little bit too
John, you're using a very strong red or red-orange as the base for your eye?
Yeah,
Is that because
straight.
it's brown eyes?
Yes, it's straight burnt sienna,
So
initially.
If you had a blue-eyed person or a green-eyed person,
I'd go with some cerulean and I'd gray that down, but not to a point where the blue was lost.
okay.
And I might use cobalt. I don't think I would ever use ultramarine because I don't know. Cobalt, I think, so maybe a little more transparent than.
John, what size brush is that?
I think it's Princeton. I've been using it a long time. Yeah, Princeton round number probably 3 or 4 or something like that. Now this is dark in here, shouldn't be dark. Now one thing about highlight is the light's coming from here, goes through the eyeball, comes out the other side. So this area here should always be a little lighter than everything else around it. Now the pupil is straight ivory black, right from the tube. And actually, I have to take my glasses off for this.
I know.
And then we bring it up into the top of the eye as well. And then down. You don't want the the circle that goes around the eye to be black. So you can always go to your darker version of your burnt sienna mix. And put that in the circle there. It's still a little bit too wet. And then you can carry it just a little bit. That's not the right color there on her lid, but it helps to, what an eye, huh? There's still more work to be done on it, but that's the basics, okay? And we're only going to do one eye. Now the nostrils, of course, you want to get dark there, and I don't know what I did with that gray. Anyway, The nostrils are kind of the same thing. You want them warm, but not black. And some portion of it is actually a little, that's the wrong color. I don't have, maybe a cad red somewhere. Oh, I'll live with that for now. We'll just mix it in. The nostrils, I say, are kind of black. They're not black. They're warm dark, okay? Isn't it fantastic? You start putting that's how important darks are. Bang! Things start to happen when you put the dark in. So it's kind of dark at the top, but there'd be more light coming in at the bottom. So I'm going to just add a little bit of rose madder at the bottom. And just sort of let it bleed in a little bit. Just a breath. You probably can't even see it there. We'll do the same thing on the other side. And the light's coming from this way, so it should be technically a little warmer. Just let it kind of bleed in there. Now I can't resist not doing this. Let's see, I'm going to put a little rose madder in here and a little yellow ochre. I'm sorry, this is the moment when I say, I've got to do something. So we put the little yellow ochre and a little rose madder in there around the highlight. A little more rose madder as you come down. And then soften an edge. And all of a sudden, you have a nose. That's not exactly the color I want there. I'd rather have more of a yellow ochre there. Yeah. Too dark, so we'll just lift that. Now the highlight's a little harsh, so towards the end of the painting, you would smooth out some edges. Put in a more appropriate color for the highlight, and then the shadow shape on the bottom of the nose. Look at that, fantastic. Oh my God, look at that, huh? Oh.
Beautiful.
Whew. Now the last, not the last thing I want to do is put the shadow under the nose. I'm going to use some of that skin tone there. Is that skin tone? No, I don't know what that is. I'll have to make it fast. I'm going to make it a dynamic duo. And make it a gray. How are we doing on time? We should be, oh, I got it. I'm going to move on to the next step here quickly. It's too red. What do I need? Red. I need a yellow and blue. Okay. I'm not sure this is the correct color, but I want you to see that once you put the shadow under the nose, it really starts to make sense. Now, ordinarily I do this wet into wet so that I can control. And once again, I'll put a little brilliant orange in there as it comes down out of the shadow. So really playing with color here, I'm not following the thing at all. So anyway, how you approach your modeling of your features starts with getting some of your darks in so that you, again, know where the value should go in terms of changes. It may just simply turn out that you hit it the first time, but probably not. And the last thing I'm going to do is just move this down a little bit into the lip area. And right away, she's coming to life. Now, I'm going to have to move on to the next step, but ordinarily what I was going to do was do the lips, which I'll show you how I did it. And I would then darken this shape here as well. There's a risk to glazing. Some of you may have figured this out. It took me quite a while to figure it out. And that is that the more you glaze, the greater the risk you have of developing blotches, especially if you tend to paint wet and wet. Because this is only one wash here, but I'm going to darken this. I would wet just the corners as I come down, not this area, right in here. So I have control of the edge, and then I would do wet and dry in here, just touching the wetness. But if I should make all of this wet, it starts to lift the pigment underneath, mingles with the pigment you're putting down, and before you know it, you're stuck with a lot of blotches, which you can get rid of with patience. But so I'm going to go on to the next step because we're running out of time here. So that's not it. Now here I've done the eyes, put in more modeling, did the nose a little bit, and here's where you're sort of on your own. You're not necessarily trying to follow specific steps. You're just kind of looking the thing over, trying to decide, well, what do I need to help make this thing work? Getting closer and closer and closer. Well, the first thing is we ought to have, since the eyebrows tend to be dark, we should be getting those in. And it's going to use a little burnt sienna and ivory black, because the hair eventually is not going to be this color. Here's a good case where you need to have the photograph available or your reference available so that you know what the shape is supposed to be. And you're just sort of trying to get a local color in. And it's darker in the shadow. In other words, it's darker this way, but as you come into the light, it should get a little lighter. So maybe leave a spot missing there so you can soften it. And then when you come down into the crevice of the eye, it gets a little darker again. Let's see if that works. When the time comes to put the actual texture in for a, the actual hairs, you wouldn't put all the hairs in, but what the heck puddle did I use? You just throw in some that go in the direction of that the hair goes, and not necessarily all of them. Now, looking at the photograph, you can see as you come into the light, this area is lighter than there, so we have to pay attention to that. And here, I'm just fooling around. I'm not trying to replicate anything, just trying to make something that makes sense. And my work, it sounds so elitist. I try to pay attention more to shifts in temperature than value. But that's important, but when I was doing the nose before, I like being able to show that things are warmer as it comes into the light and cooler when they go away from the light. And so here's a case where I kind of want that to make sense. Okay, that's enough of that. Now, this cheek, although it's all in light, this area here is a little darker than the rest of it. So, so we're going to just throw in some general skin tone, a little yellow ochre, and I'm going to use a little orange, not orange lake, brilliant orange. It's it's so transparent, and it's made by whatever. And here I have no risk really in wet and wet, so I'm going to wet it a little bit first, so I have some control. And because some of this is warmer than others, as it comes, the cheekbone's going to grab the light, so I'm going to put a little orange lake in there first. And then I'm going to add the yellow ochre from there. And then finishing off down here. It'll make her beautiful. Let's see, now, there is an area in the muzzle that tends to be cooler and maybe even a little green. So I'm going to add a little yellow ochre and cerulean blue to that area. That's a little bit of a green tone, not too much. And put it right in there. I'll even leave that little blotch there. I'm not that interested in fixing that. And the nose, here's another case where the nose goes into shadow, but as it comes out of shadow, and it's on not the lit side, I'm going to add a little brilliant orange in there as I come across with some yellow ochre. What are we doing on time here? Okay, pretty soon we got to call it a day. God, I love that color. Gee. Just hit the lips for a second here. Just I'm going to give them a little rosy, more of a pinkish color to it. Throw some orange in there. And maybe a little of that. I think that's a razor that goes straight. Should be darker, so this is the last step. Everybody's hungry, including myself. bit too red, but again, it has, what's around it makes the difference there. And if it's too red, we just do that. Okay, that's it. I hope you figured it out.
Your layering is amazing.
My who?
Your layering, how you layer your colors.
Oh, yeah. That's because I can't go for something that fast. I can't just hit it the first time. I gotta really sneak up on it, you know, and be real quiet about it. All right, well, thank you very much for your attention.
Guys, thank you John, for your demo. Fantastic. And I was going to be painted by numbers. Okay.